if I'm not mistaken, from start to finish, he's the best player on the court. So there's no point throughout the match where he's not being the best player, which I don't think I'd ever seen. So, I mean, I think that speaks volumes regarding how good Tapia was, because they knew that this was going to be the last major tournament for the next month and a half. They were extra excited, extra pumped. They just seemed so much more on it.
We as well kind of linked to the mental side. Tapia seemed a lot more eager to get on Coello's side, especially with the smashes. We know he loves to smash, the one where he tucks in under Coello and goes to his side and essentially lets it fly.
Now, I think that right now, the rivalry that we're seeing between Chingotto Galan and Tapia Coello is way more even than what we've previously seen.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Padel Pod, your weekly podcast covering professional padel, presented by Hugo and Gons. We're on to episode 59, and as always, joined by my co-host here today. Hugo, it's great to have you on. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks, Gons. I mean, I've got to be honest, I'm a bit under the weather after a big weekend, a bit of a bender. You know very well because you were with me. For all our fans to be aware, a few of our, Gons, myself, and 6 other mates, we were in Mallorca since, for the weekend, last weekend. And as you can imagine, it was pretty big. We all got a bit too excited. We were out until pretty late most of the night. So still feeling it big time.
Yeah, well, hopefully you get back better, get well soon, because I need you by my side, mate. I need you in the paddle court.
Yeah, no, 100%. I just managed to squeeze in a quick one. Literally finished about half an hour ago. Fortunately, my teammate got injured, so not the best start to the week. But you and I are back to the training sessions tomorrow, so really looking forward to that. But I mean, to be honest, what I'm really looking forward to is cracking on and talking about paddle. Real paddle.
Yeah, exactly. Because we are heading now into the summer season. I mean, there is one, I guess, proper tournament left, like a P2, before we do head into fully summer. So probably good time to talk about paddle, given that we will miss it because we won't have it for such a long time, or at least it will feel like that. I mean, I don't know if maybe our audience don't know this. I think I told you maybe this weekend, Hugo, but Galan and Chingotto and Tapia are not playing the Finland P2, or at least they're not. They haven't entered the draw. So that means that this is literally the last we'll see of them until like September. So it's a massive, massive gap that we will not be able to see some of our favorite players. So yeah, maybe let's cracking on, because again, it was another epic showdown down in Malaga, a P1. Let me just start by saying that I loved the tournament and the fans as well. I thought they were really, really good. It's great to see at any time sort of paddle goes to the south of Spain. I think you can really see how much the fans love it. And it was great to see. Also nice that it was an indoor tournament, because we haven't seen many of those this year so far. So also nice just to change it up a bit. And despite the fact that in theory conditions were different, the thing that didn't change was, once again, we saw the same final. Coello and Tapia against Chingotto and Galan. I can't remember. I don't know, like, what episode is this now of this battle? Is like 7th or 8th, but maybe even more. In any case, this time it did go to Coello and Tapia after a massive loss in Genova, and also a loss at the Italian major. We both felt like Coello and Tapia needed to make a big statement in Malaga, and they certainly did. Hugo, do you want to maybe kick off and give your thoughts on that?
100%. I mean, I think the main highlight, or maybe a quick heading, would be 5-4 to Chingalan, because they've played each other 9 times so far this season. So if I'm not mistaken, the last 9 finals, apart from was it the Bordeaux P2, where neither pair participated? The last 9 finals.
Bordeaux B2 didn't participate, and then in Seville, Chingotto and Galan, Coello Tapia faced each other in the semi-finals, so it was a different final.
You're right. They've met in 8 finals and 1 semi-final. So overall score is 5-4 to Chingalan, as I just mentioned. But after an unbelievable thumping last week, because obviously, as we all know, Chingotto and Galan had beaten Coello and Tapia 6-1, 6-1. Coello and Tapia have managed to completely flip the switch, and convincingly, I wouldn't say it was a thrashing, but pretty much almost a thrashing. They convincingly beat Chingotto and Galan 6-2, 6-3 in Malaga. So, I mean, to be honest, I think the best way to start would be to say that the most important, or at least in my opinion, the key reason why the Bombarderos or the Golden Boys won the final is Don Agustín Tapia. I thought he was back to his best. He had a sensational match. He generated so many winners, very few unforced errors. I mean, I've looked at the stats and I'm looking at them right now. 18 winners and 4 unforced errors for Tapia, which compared to Galan, for example, who was the best out of his pair with Chingotto, Galan had three fewer winners and 7 more unforced errors. And that's a massive, massive difference. And I mean, obviously, we can talk about more about the play and just the general feel. But when you look at the contribution score and the actual graph of each player's line, you normally see them kind of mix and mingle and interchange throughout the match. If you actually look at Tapia's line, if I'm not mistaken, from start to finish, he's the best player on the court. So there's no point throughout the match where he's not being the best player, which I don't think I'd ever seen. So, I mean, I think that speaks volumes regarding how good Tapia was. I mean, his smashing was back to its best. I mean, that kick smash that we love to see. He's even incorporated a few jump smashes, which we're not used to seeing that much, but he's actually nailing those as well. So, yeah, I mean, I genuinely think that Tapia was the key reason why they managed to overcome Chingotto and Galan this time. He managed to work his way around being frozen out throughout the last few games, or at least Chingotto and Galan had previously tried to play a bigger percentage of the balls to Coello, because, I mean, I think we all agree that Tapia is slightly more decisive than Coello generally. And it had been working, but not this week, because Tapia was making a massive effort to, basically to creep into Coello's space and ask for more balls and go for more shots. So, yeah, I mean, those would probably be my initial thoughts. One extra point that I wanted to add, and I think it was a key difference as well. We've seen how many times Coello and Tapia get really up for games when either they've lost a big match in the previous tournament, or because it's a key game. And I think because they knew that this was going to be the last major tournament for the next month and a half, they were extra excited, extra pumped. They just seemed so much more on it and so much more kind of, their movement, they were so much quicker. They were wanting to kind of grab the match by its neck, and it clearly worked out.
Yeah, I think mentally this match was really strong from Coello and Tapia. I felt like they were extremely motivated to play this game. They wanted to make a statement. They wanted to essentially silence any doubts about them as a pair, and they certainly did. I mean, they did come off the back of 2 kind of big losses, one because of the score and the other because of the importance of the tournament in the Italy Major. So I felt like they weren't going to lose that match in that sense. And on the other side, I do think that Galan and Chingotto were kind of hangover. It did feel like they weren't necessarily super motivated to play the final, and certainly not like they had been in the previous 2 finals, where they seemed super fired up. It almost felt like they were a bit tired, just a bit on the body language, vocally, they didn't seem like super energetic as they normally do. So from that perspective, I do think that the balance was definitely more towards Coello and Tapia, who kind of wanted it and needed it a bit more, I would say. And I feel like Galan and Chingotto, they kind of knew that they didn't need to win that match, essentially. And I think that's from like the mental standpoint. From a Padel and maybe more play perspective, I thought it was really interesting. We definitely did seem to see a change in sort of like styles, and mainly coming from Tapia and Coello, I guess, sort of reacting to the kind of nevera that Tapia has been sort of suffering. So in terms of like volumes played, it did seem a lot more balanced than it had done in the past. So Tapia played 47% of the balls, Coello played 53% of the balls. And interestingly enough, I think that this mainly came from the fact that Coello and Tapia, Coello especially wasn't playing as much to Chingotto, and Tapia as well certainly was not playing as much to Chingotto. So Coello played 58% of his balls to Chingotto and 42% to Galan, and vice versa. So Chingotto played 58% to Coello and 42% to Tapia. Normally we see this number, especially from Chingotto, like way higher. So he's normally playing to Coello like so much more. And actually, we've seen in a couple of games that Galan actually is quite equal. So I felt like by Coello not playing as much to Chingotto, essentially not like answering every single ball that Chingotto is giving to him, and Galan also, and Tapia also focusing on playing a lot more to Galan. That's how they got, I guess, to essentially then Galan, because he does play quite equal, to get Tapia more involved. So I feel like they did a bit of a change there. And then maybe as well, kind of linked to the mental side, Tapia seemed a lot more eager to get on Coello's side, especially with the smashes. We know he loves the smash, the one where he tucks in under Coello and goes to his side and essentially lets it fly. And he certainly did that a couple of times. And then maybe one last point that I do want to mention as well is that I felt like in the important points, they were even better. So many times Tapia went in and had the right smash. Chingotto and Galan had 5 break points, but didn't get any of them. So I do think that also shows how strong in the game they were mentally and how up they were for it. But yeah, I would say that the main headlines for me were that Coello and Tapia just mentally were superior in that match, and that they kind of responded to that freeze from a adjustment and stylistic play perspective, and it definitely seemed to work.
100%. I mean, I totally agree with that. It's really interesting that you mentioned how the direction of play on behalf of Tapia and Coello has changed, and I definitely agree that affected the match. I think they were probably playing, particularly Coello, probably playing too many balls to Chingotto. And we know how consistent Chingotto is. So if you play the way that he expects you to play, he's going to commit very few unforced errors. And we saw actually Tapia look a lot and try to play with Chingotto and try to attack Chingotto down Chingotto's forehand side. So down the kind of parallel, as per se. And I think that was actually really, really effective. So I definitely agree that there was a big change regarding their style. However, I think there is one thing that I'd potentially want to highlight, and maybe I wouldn't agree with completely, is you said that you don't think this game was as important for Chingalan. And I know where you're coming from. They're obviously 5-3 up in terms of their head-to-head. But at the same time, they are the chasers. They are the number 2 ranked pair. And I think, and it seems pretty clear to me, that unless they keep on winning and make that gap even bigger in terms of how many times they beat Coello and Tapia and how many trophies they win, they won't be reaching the number 1 spot before the end of the season, which is clearly what they want as a pair. So that's the only thing that I would say I'd slightly disagree with, because I think if Coello and Tapia make the final in most of the tournaments between now and the end of the season, they'll probably keep the number 1 spot. So Chingotto and Galan really have to, keep playing at the level that they've played at so far. And actually that leads me on to another point that I wanted to highlight. I thought that Galan was slightly below the usual level that he's been playing at, which, to be honest, is not very hard, because I mean, we've obviously discussed how well he's been playing, and it's been probably the best streak that I've seen in a very, very long time, if not ever. I mean, in terms of the highest level of play, obviously Tapia towards the start of last season, the first 6-7 months of 2023, he was unplayable. Obviously, also Coello, but we previously mentioned that we thought Tapia was playing a little bit better and leading the pair. But Galan for the last 12 months has been pretty much at that level, if not better. Sorry. So he seemed a bit nervous. I thought that he seemed a bit nervous, a bit eager to finish the points quickly. And yeah, it almost felt like the decision-making was letting him down. And I also actually pointed this out to you when I was watching the match. I didn't feel that he went for that many smashes compared to, well, how much he tries to and how much he believes in his smash, which is, I mean, makes total sense because he is the best smasher or the second best smasher behind Tapia on tour. So yeah, I do feel that, as we've previously discussed, Galan kind of marks the ceiling of the pair. Chingotto can win games himself. He's done it previously, but Galan's obviously in charge of generating the bigger percentage of winners. And I just feel that he was slightly below the level required.
Yes, Galan, excuse me, Galan certainly was not what we've sort of been accustomed to seeing as of late. I mean, it's a very high standard that he's set for himself. So in all fairness, he is human. He can have these moments. We've seen other greats such as Tapia also not have good finals or good matches. So yeah, I mean, I think it's normal. I just feel like there was this. I guess I don't want to say that it's not an important match. It definitely is, like for the number one race. I mean, it's a P1, so it's definitely an important tournament. And the last final that they beat Coello and Tapia was a P2, so I mean, half as important as the P1. So it definitely was an important match. But I just kind of felt that it almost felt like a hangover game for them. It just didn't feel like they were so up for it, to be honest, and certainly not as Coello and Tapia. So I don't think it's more from, like, I guess, like a feeling and moral perspective, like from a sentiment perspective. Like, I don't feel like they needed to win that game as much as Coello and Tapia did. So that's why I think that they weren't necessarily like super motivated by that. But I definitely think that in the next match, I mean, they will be extra motivated. I mean, we know how how competitive both of them are. So I'm sure that this loss, it does hurt them, and it is also the first time, if I'm not mistaken, that they lose to Coello and Tapia in 2 sets. So because all the other finals had always gone to 3 sets, and the time that Galan beat them in the semifinals, that was 2 sets. So I mean, this was quite a big win. Like, it was quite dominant, as you said at the beginning. They never really had a chance. So I'm sure that they're kind of bummed down about essentially letting this happen. And actually, I do want to say something on kind of related to the switch in play, which I just think also speaks to the importance of Chingotto in the pair. I know that, I mean, and we both believe that essentially the ceiling of Galan is essentially how Galan is doing. But I do think that the fact that Chingotto didn't have as much, essentially, the ball, and wasn't able to dictate the play as much to Coello as we've seen in the past. Like, Chingotto's normally like 70% of his shots go to Coello, and the fact that this time it was way less and more balanced, I just think it speaks to him, like how good he is in terms of dictating play and making sure that the game is in the balance, even though he might not finish the points. And at the end of the day, it's Galan that's like his job. But Chingotto is like controlling the point, and he's making sure that the ball is essentially going where it's in the best interest of the pair for then to Galan to take over that. So the fact that they essentially, Coello and Tapia, didn't let Chingotto get into that sort of rhythm, I think just shows you as well how important Chingotto is for both, for the pair, essentially.
100%. I mean, we've mentioned it previously, and I don't want to go into too much more depth, but Galan is, really interestingly, I was watching an interview with Galan, and he was talking about his partnership with Lebrón and how well they had previously done. And I might have misunderstood this, but I don't think I did. he said something along the lines of, I'm really happy playing with Chingotto and we're more consistent and we've reached a higher level than when I was playing with Lebrón. Now, those are really big words because basically what he was saying with Lebrón is that they kind of had peaks, but also other moments where they weren't playing as well. Whereas with Chingotto, I mean, since they've paired up, they've made the final in every single tournament, if not won it. So, I mean, it is, I can see his point, but I was really, really surprised that firstly say that, given that he was the number one ranked pair in the world alongside Lebrón for 3.5 years, and B, just say that publicly, like now, given that Lebrón clearly struggling. It's almost like a bit of a jab to your ex-teammate, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, it does seem like that. And to be fair, I also think that he's being a bit cheeky there, because I feel like he's kind of saying like it's my best level rather than like the best as a pair. I mean, he is obviously saying, like, he literally said the best as a pair, but I kind of feel like he's saying, you know, it's the best that I've been at, because I mean, realistically, Galan and Lebrón were at like a ridiculous level. Like there were times where it was just like they were literally unplayable. Like we've always had, or recently, excuse me, we've had a 1 and a 2 that are very clear 1 and a 2, but back then it was literally a 1. Like so. Yeah, I think a bit cheeky from him, I feel.
I definitely think it's cheeky. Maybe thinking and maybe backing his argument is the fact that throughout the 3.5 years when they were at the top of the rankings, they obviously faced tough pairs that did well for a period of time. But I wouldn't say that they consistently challenged Lebrón Galán, because we saw, well, it was Sanyo and Tapia for 1 point during a few months, basically half a season or 3/4 of a season. Then it was Paquito and Nenno for quite a decent gap. Bella and Sanyo for a few months before they split. Now, I think that right now, the rivalry that we're seeing between Chingotto Galán and Tapia Coello is way more even than what we've previously seen. And I'd almost say, I mean, I've been watching Padel, say, for 7 or 8 years now, I'd say, consistently. And I know about, and I've watched other top pairs, number 1, number 2 ranked pairs play, and the kind of the big tournaments, the big finals, the major highlights. And I'm kind of edging towards saying that this is one of the greatest rivalries of modern padel.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly feels like that. The head-to-head is incredibly balanced, because if we take a look at last year, where we thought that the head-to-head between, or we thought that the two, essentially the top 2 pairs, Los Super Pibes and Coello and Tapia, and we thought that was like a pretty epic battle. But realistically, when you look at the head-to-head, I mean, it's night and day. It was clearly Coello and Tapia were way ahead. I mean, I can't remember exactly what the head-to-head is now, but there's something like 8 or like 8 and 3, or I can't remember exactly, but it's really skewed in favor of Coello and Tapia. So the fact that now it's 5-4 Chingotto and Galán, and it's almost like they're winning every other tournament. So one tournament Chingotto and Galán, then literally the next tournament Coello and Tapia. Yeah, I think it's I do agree with you. I'm not sure that we've seen it so balanced for so consistent, because it does feel, and kind of, I think you just mentioned that it's there's streaks and there's moments where pairs are getting hot and they win, like, I don't know, maybe like 80% of the tournaments in like a 3-month span, but then they drop off, and then another like pair comes along and they get hot and win a series of tournaments. Whereas this one, it literally feels like it's them too. And it's like, okay, you win this one, then you win the next one, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I mean, I just can't wait, to be honest, to what the second half of the season has got in store for us.
I mean, obviously it'd be great for the rivalry to continue and for them to keep on playing these finals, and it would just be like an epic, almost like a Real Madrid Man City in the Champions League, just like which has become a kind of the common massive game over the last 4 or 5 years. I could see that happening, But at the same time, I have a feeling that with these pair changes, obviously big pair changes with the Nenno teaming up with Lebrón, Stupa and Yanguas, who we've both discussed that we think could be a great partnership. Coqui and John slowly getting back to their best level. Paquito teaming up with a very hot and young prospect in Pablo Cardona. I do think there's going to be other pairs that win tournaments between now and the end of the season or that cause upsets. And I think that could... We've seen how big and how important it is when one of the big pairs loses a match against another pair. Like that changes the momentum and changes the swing of things. So I just have a slight feeling that something could change. But to be honest, it's going off feeling, because going off statistics and going off what we've been seeing so far, yeah, I mean, most people would probably say I'm crazy.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, my head says it is literally going to be like this until the end of the season, because as you say, like if we literally look at all these statistics and stuff, like I just can't imagine another final or another pair winning the title. But in my heart, you're like, it has to change at some point, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, we've obviously said that we don't put massive faith in the Nenno Lebrón, at least right now, because Lebrón going back to the backhand is a risk, and he hasn't been playing at his best level. The Nenno's right now are not at his best level or at his peak. Yanguas and Stupa, they look great on paper, but who knows? Pablo Cardona is a bit of a risk for Paquito, even though he's been doing really well. He's still very young and he's not at the level of the top players on tour. So you'd imagine that Galan and Tapia could very much continue their streak, but it just feels like, I don't think I've ever experienced a season where only two pairs have won tournaments. I know John and Coqui won a tournament this season, but Galan and Tapia weren't playing, so I don't really count it. But yeah, I think there's going to be more winners. I mean, even last season, if you think about it, there were four pairs that won tournaments, because we had Coello and Tapia dominate the first half. Then the Super Pibes won a few. Then when Lebrón got back to it from his injury, him and Galan were back to their best and won most of the tournaments between then and the end of the season. And obviously Paquito and Chingotto reaped an epic in the last tournament of the season and won it. So, I mean, even though the statistics right now say these guys are dominating, it's not going to change. Statistics of previous seasons probably point towards other things happening at some point, because 12 months is a very long time.
Yeah. And I mean, definitely knock on wood on this. So far, we haven't seen like major injuries from in general. I'd say from all the tour, all the players. So I mean, that's massive news. And we know last season was quite riddled with injuries. So hopefully it continues like this. Like I said, touch wood that we don't get any injuries. So if we don't get any injuries, we'll see. But definitely last season, I think a big factor was injuries, and the fact that allowed, I think, some pairs to essentially be able to win titles at I guess at different points in time, which then once you win the first title, I guess that can catapult you to continue winning on furthermore. So yeah, but we'll see how it is. But I mean, I agree with you. It just doesn't seem likely that it will continue, just for the two essentially big dogs continue winning like this, because it's just like unprecedented, basically.
It really is. And I know obviously we've discussed the final, which to be honest was the major highlight of the Malaga P1. And we don't want to bore our listeners for very long, but I do think that it's important that we give a quick mention and talk about the major goodbyes that happened in the Malaga P1, because there's a lot of pairs that are splitting, and Malaga was their last tournament, namely Paquito and Lebrón, the Super Pibes, so Stupa and Nenno, also the most improved pair of the season in Yanguas and Garrido, and even Momo and Alex, who were slowly getting back to the level that they demonstrated when they were teamed up in the first place. So, yeah, Gons, maybe your initial thoughts on maybe the major two pairs, Lebrón and Paquito and the Super Pibes. How did you think they performed throughout the week in Malaga? And did you expect more? Did you, just general thoughts would be great to hear.
If I'm honest, I did not expect more from either of them. I never expected them to make a run to the final or even win the title, even though maybe we've seen that sometimes these last dancers give a final hurrah. I mean, we know that Paquito had won with the Nenno in his last dance. He's won with Chingotto. Maybe I'm missing someone else there as well, but we know that he loved it. But it wasn't meant to be this time. I just feel like the pairs, both of them I'm speaking about, they weren't motivated. Like, it just felt like they kind of really wanted to get over it. It felt like in their heads, it just felt like their heads were elsewhere. And I think that alongside the fact that they're just not as good right now, definitely from a paddle perspective, against Chingotto and Galan and Coello and Tapia, I just don't think that they were ever going to do it. So yeah, in my head, I mean, Super Pibes, obviously really sad to see them split. They've been a very successful pair. I definitely see that partnership as a massive success. Paquito and Lebrón, on the other hand, very disappointed about their general performance. I definitely expected more from them, but yeah, I wasn't surprised at all to essentially see them go and not win this title or make it into the finals. What about you, Hugo?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I was hopeful. I did have a feeling that when pairs have their last dance, it gives them an extra boost. And we've seen how pairs who've been, the last tournament of a wide variety of pairs has been a great tournament for them. And they've even won the tournament. But yeah, I mean, I think it just reflects how dominant Galan and Goyo Dabia are right now. I do actually think that Paquito and Lebrón, since they announced they were splitting, they've been so much more positive on the court, throughout the changeovers, etc. And even though they lost in 2 sets against Goyo and Dabia, and they've had other matches where they've been closer to winning. Obviously, they had 2 match points against them in one of the tournaments. I can't remember when. I think it might have been, no, it wasn't Seville. It was a different tournament. But yeah, I still felt that they were being really positive, and it just feels weird because you almost think that they're now throughout press conferences, they were saying how much they value each other, how they've loved playing with each other, how they're really good mates. Can't you keep that positive vibe and positive energy when you're a pair and use that to your advantage? Because if they really are best mates, then surely they could have changed the situation or made an effort to just be more positive. I mean, I know that they had a couple of big upsets as a pair. It's obvious. They lost to John and Goggi a couple of times, another big match, but they made the semi-finals in most tournaments that they played. I mean, at least more than half, which was really their objective. And looking at the level of Galan and Goyo Dabia, it's not surprising. I know that when they teamed up originally, we wanted them to win tournaments, and that was clearly their objective and their expectation. But seeing the level, I mean, I think they should have been more positive about how they were playing, at least tried to be more positive, because I definitely think, given how emotional they are, being negative and a bit naggy throughout the changeovers has affected them. So, yeah, I was surprised that their attitude was so positive, to be honest. And then, however, I totally agree regarding Super Pibes. I thought you could see, when you were watching them play throughout the semi-final, they just felt so down. They weren't pumped. The Nenno was trying to get Stupa up for it, but Stupa in particular was really down, not feeling it. And then they weren't having those fist bumps, and they just never really felt like they were going to get into the game against Chingotto Galán. So I was quite surprised that their attitude was, I'd say, so poor, because they're best mates and their partnership has been so successful that there's no shame in splitting now if you think that there's a better pair that you can be playing with. And maybe just finally on Yanguas Garrido, another kind of disappointment because they lost against Ruiz and Cardona in the third set. I mean, they lost in the third set, 7-6. It can go either way, and obviously we know that Ruiz and Cardona have been a great pair, but still, I mean, Yanguas and Garrido have been the best of the rest. And I was personally very excited because it was the first time that they were meant to face Galan in the quarterfinals. And well, previously I would have thought that would have been a great match, but we weren't able to see it. So yeah, I mean, I think they didn't seem to be that sync on court. And I have a feeling that Garrido's a little bit angry and a little bit pissed off with Yanguas because they were doing really well as a pair. And looking at the social media posts where Yanguas posts various times about how well they've done and saying thanks a lot to Garrido, etc. There hasn't been many likes from Garrido and not many comments saying kind of thank you. I feel the same way. So yeah, I think it's been a bit of a frosty ending, which I understand from Garrido's point of view. We're doing really well as a pair. Why not continue? Particularly if the third and fourth seeded pairs are splitting, that could be an opportunity to kind of grab and try to clinch that third spot. But on the flip side, Yanguas has the opportunity to play with a backhand player who is probably, I think we'd all agree, a better player overall than Garrido when we talk about Stupa. So I get his decision. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to highlight those points.
Yeah, on Garrido and Yanguas, I think potentially there's an element of Garrido thinking why always me, because he obviously had a terrible season last year with so many of his teammates being injured. He had so many different pairs. So for once, he found like a really good partnership with Yanguas. They were doing super well. Like the whole team that they formed around each other was great. They obviously had those kind of tough moments maybe in the bench, but when you're in the moment, heat of the game, all of that, it's completely understandable that these things happen. And I'm sure that off court they did get along. So I'm not sure if it's like personal on Yanguas. Like, I mean, probably there is some resentment from Garrido there, but I'm sure that it will go away. But I mean, if I was in his position, I would also just be like, oh, come on, like, why is this like always happening to me? No. So he's probably, just feeling not so great at the moment, but I'm sure it will go away. But very, very sad as well. I think out of all the pairs, the ones that I'm most sad about splitting are definitely Super Pibes and, but even more, I would say Garrido and Yanguas, because Super Pibes, we've kind of seen them like at the peak, and it just really felt like this time they weren't going to get to that level again. Whereas Garrido and Yanguas, you almost felt like completely opposite. You felt like they could get to such a high level. So yeah, very, very sad to see them split, but I really like both of them as players. So I mean, I'll cheer both of them on because they're also great to see. And Yanguas and Stupa, as we've mentioned, I think that's going to be a really nice partnership. Definitely a very fun one to watch.
100%. I mean, I do think that Stupa really needs to up his game though, because I think he's really dropped off over recent weeks. And when you look at Garrido, he's been in form this season. He's had a couple of bad tournaments here and there, but he's been so good, and Stupa's been dropping off. So yeah, I mean, we'll see. I mean, we'll see whether they're able to do better than, well, whether Yanguas and Stupa are a better pair than Yanguas and Garrido, because the bar is obviously very high. And just one other point that I'm really sad to see is, and to hear about, is that Yanguas won't be working with Juan Mieres, it looks like. It looks like he's just going to be working with Carlos Pozzoni, who's obviously Stupa's longtime coach. And I just think that that's so, I'd say unfair is maybe a word. Maybe it's not the word to be using, but Yanguas has been the most improved player this season. I'd say he's definitely the most improved player. And he's been playing the best padel of his career. And I think a big part of it is down to being coached by Juan Mieres. So it's just sad that you let your main coach go and you just end up working with a different player's coach on an exclusive basis. But I guess that's just the nature of the game.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm sure it won't be the end of Juan Jimenez and Yanguas. I'm sure that we'll see them again at some point, because it also seems like they've got a kind of great relationship off court. But yeah, I think that probably brings us to the end of the episode. As always, Hugo, it's been a pleasure to have you. For all our audience, do leave a comment, subscribe, give us a like, give us your thoughts as well of how you think what the pairs did, and what do you think of Chingotto, Galan, and Coello and Tapia? Where's the battle? Who's going to win it? All of that. I mean, we're always very excited to read your comments, guys. So yeah, that's it from me. I don't think we have any paddle this week. If I'm not, well, we do have a FIP for those like really, really crazy hardcore paddle fans, which I know that everyone listening to this is. We do have a FIP in Sardinia, so please do follow that. It might even be available on YouTube to watch, if I'm not mistaken, because they normally are. Yeah. So yeah, interesting pair of theirs as well that are going to be playing as a one-off. For example, Torito Aguirre and Miguel Lamperti. I mean, that's probably going to be a show. But yeah, I hope everyone enjoyed, and we'll definitely catch you next time.
Yeah, guys, we're loving those comments and interactions, so please keep them coming. They've been growing a lot over recent weeks, so we're really happy to see that you're really engaged and hopefully liking the content. And given that there's going to be a few weeks throughout the next 5-6 weeks where we won't have tournaments to discuss, if there's ever any topic or topics that you want us to talk about, please let us know in the comments, and we'll definitely take them on board, because right now is the best chance to do so. So yeah, guys, have a great week and catch you soon.